You talk a lot in your materials and AMI marketing materials and everything about that it factor.
Yes.
So talk a little bit more about what that is.
Man, so it's funny, I just kind of mentioned it, but being authentically you, owning who you are regardless of what space you're in, and being comfortable with that. I think the biggest thing coming out of that financial industry, there's about 50,000 banks, right? Probably less than that, but who cares? But separating yourself from your competition is really owning who you are and showing up consistently, and make sure you look consistent, like you said. Make sure you're showing up consistently in the community. You're showing consistently up in who you are and just owning that space and not allowing anybody to throw you off or tell you, hey, don't show up like that. The it factor is really owning who you are and being unapologetically you. And most people think the it factor is something really spectacular, but it's really just owning who you are and not compromising and not dumbing yourself down, not making yourself less than to make others feel better. I think the sooner we understand as a society that our superpower is really being you, then you open up the floodgates to opportunity. There's endless opportunity once you embrace finally being you and truly accepting your it factor.
All right. Well, I am here with Allison McFarlane from AMI. So excited to have this happen. Similar to the first episode podcast that I did with Roberto. I'd had a number of conversations with you, and it just felt like, why don't we just record this? Because there was
Yes.
always so many great insights that came out of it. It was always such a really good conversation. So super thankful. Thank you for taking some time to record with me and to share your wonderful insights and experience.
Yes. Oh my God, Chris, I'm honored. First of all, congratulations on your podcast. Congratulations on your new Chris 4.0. That's super exciting. I'm excited to witness what you do and what you'll bring to the community and just your elevation. So first of all, thank you. It is my pleasure and my honor. I feel like you're one of my Yodas. So whenever those people call upon me, I'll make myself available. But I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'll take any kind of Yoda references as a compliment. Fantastic. Well, and you also sort of have just recently launched
Yeah.
AMI. So, just really along those lines, why don't you tell a little bit about your story? Because this is a little bit of a pivot for you as well.
Right. So I have been in the financial industry for over 15 years. It was an amazing experience. I love being in banking. I love being able to help clients. But my true passion has always been that marketing and branding. So before I got into the financial industry, I used to model for a couple years, and through that, it really helped build my self confidence. I became more confident in who Allison is, what she brings to the table, how she can how to just illuminate who I am and be comfortable in that space. So through my career in banking, I've had many opportunities to work with some amazing people and just some amazing corporations. But I really found in the last year, my daughter's about to leave for college. And I was like, what's next for me? Am I going to stay at the bank, or am I really going to pursue my original passion, which is really helping people elevate their brand, elevate themselves, and get the visibility they need, especially being in that small business space. I feel like a lot of small business owners don't understand why marketing and branding is so important. There can be many people in the marketplace that have the same type of product as you, the same type of service, but if you can help elevate and differentiate your it factor, you really don't have any competition. Your competition is yourself. So that's where AMI was born, out of me just being ready to pivot and get out of the financial industry and really come back to my roots, um, with the branding and marketing of myself. And I've been very successful at it. So I'm just excited. It's something I would do for free. So I'm like, this is it. But now I need to definitely charge. But but I just love it, and I'm super passionate about it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that 5, 10 years ago, it was a little bit more difficult talking to people about personal brand and branding. Um, I think that something changed during the pandemic, right? Especially when people are working remotely, and especially when you change jobs and you're remote, right? Um, everything about your brand people just kind of took for granted because it was your brand was how you showed up physically for the most
Yes.
part, right?
Yes.
So you maybe you made an entrance, you mentioned your previous career as a model,
Yes.
which I'm sure taught you certain things about your presence
Yes.
and things like that, right? So we all kind of have the ways that we show up in person, but
Right.
all that's changed when how you show up is in this format, in an all virtual type format. So then it has to become, all the things that are around me. How do I sound? How do I look? Is my lighting right? All that kind of stuff. So I think that to a certain extent, over the pandemic, people started paying a little bit more attention to their own branding and how
Yeah.
they show up, and trying to control that, not just in a physical space, but also in a virtual space. So I'm hopeful, and I think that like that's going to also sort of really kind of open up better conversations about that, just not even on Zoom calls and things like that, but also obviously in venues like LinkedIn,
Right.
and other platforms where it's really important to show up. I did a post on LinkedIn last week that talked about, because this is the fall and it's promotion season,
Yep.
that talked about you really have to sort of promote yourself.
Yes.
Not from a promotional, I mean, you do have to do that too, but
Right.
promote yourself from the perspective that, like, elevate yourself from what you used to be to what you are now. And I think to a lot of it, and in that context, what I was talking about was, people just sort of like being promoted within the same organization that they worked for, and then continuing to basically do the same job. And we've all known people like that. We've probably
Yes.
done that before,
Yes.
right? You
Yes.
just get the title, you get a bump, and it's like nothing's changed,
Yes.
right? um, so you have to promote yourself in terms of like doing different things, showing up differently, taking on different responsibilities, delegating other responsibilities, etc., making an impact in new ways. But I also think that you have to promote yourself in terms of your brand should also feel differently, right? When you get
Yes.
promoted, when you start
Yes.
a new thing, you start a new venture, your brand shouldn't look the same, right? Like
Nope.
your brand shouldn't look the same like it did when you were at the bank,
Nope.
right? Uh, my brand should look the same as from one of my previous employers. So
Right.
I think that that's really something too that people are slowly starting to understand, is almost kind of like that new year, new you, where
Yep.
it's like, okay, now I've got to like show how I'm different. So when people come and check me out online, it kind of instantly communicates the same way it does when I walk through the door.
And I think that's where your authenticity comes from. If you show up, I tell people all the time, if you're different than what we see online, and I see you in person, and you're like a totally different person, that's not truly who you are. And I live in that authentic space, even if and I don't always get it right, right? I'm human. I don't always get it perfect, but man, I try my best to live in that space that when you see Allison on LinkedIn, when you see Allison out in the community, this is the same. I am the same. I'm approachable. I love bringing people together. I love being that bridge. But it's far better to be who you are than really pretend, because that you can only sustain that for so long.
That's true. Now, another
Yes.
thing I wanted to ask you about, you talk a lot in your materials and AMI marketing materials and everything about that it factor.
Yes.
So talk a little bit more about what that is.
Man, so it's funny, I just kind of mentioned it, but being authentically you, owning who you are regardless of what space you're in, and being comfortable with that. I think the biggest thing coming out of that financial industry, there's about 50,000 banks, right? Probably less than that, but who cares? But separating yourself from your competition is really owning who you are and showing up consistently, and make sure you look consistent, like you said. Make sure you're showing up consistently in the community. You're showing consistently up in who you are, and just owning that space, and not allowing anybody to throw you off or tell you, hey, don't show up like that. The it factor is really owning who you are, and being unapologetically you. And most people think the it factor is something really spectacular, but it's really just owning who you are and not compromising, and not dumbing yourself down, not making yourself less than to make others feel better. I think the sooner we understand as a society that our superpower is really being you, then you open up the floodgates to opportunity. There's endless opportunity once you embrace finally being you and truly accepting your it factor.
I love that. Now, the only question I would have, and maybe someone watching this video might have the same question, is that sounds great. Like I'm
Uh-huh.
great, wonderful. I want to be my authentic self. How do I make that happen? Right? How do I do that exactly? Like it sounds great, but what would be, say, one tool that you, or one strategy that you would suggest that would put someone further down a path of doing that?
Executive coaching. I think one of the best things when I said Yoda, I think of you, those people that came before you that are doing it and doing it at a high level and are willing to allow you to sit at their feet and get that information. That's how you get to that authenticness, because Chris is a master at what he does. He's able to navigate, he's able to pivot, he's able to give you information that's so tangible that it makes you want to be better. So, and I think that also has to do a lot with alignment, making sure you're aligning with someone that can see your it factor, that helps you pull it out. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that was in me. But getting around the right person that can call those things out of you so that you can go forth in your it factor.
I think that is a fantastic suggestion. And obviously, I too, I believe that, and I have an executive coach. And
Right.
one of the first things that he really, we've been working together for over 10 years, and one of the first things that he taught me was about what you're talking about, your authentic self, but then also to understand how to bring the right parts of myself strategically to the right situations.
Yeah.
And at first, when he told me about that, I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, just like you said, pretend I'm something I'm not? And he said, no, he's like, listen, you don't, if you were to bring home Chris, family Chris, to the
Yeah.
workplace,
Yeah.
you end up in HR, right? If you were to, if you were to bring
That's
work
so
Chris
true.
home, it
Yeah.
would seem really odd. So we naturally do it,
Yeah.
when you're with your friends, if you go out, with your if you with your girlfriends for brunch or for drinks or whatever, happy hour, that's a different you than you bring to the office. So
Yep.
understanding we do that naturally, and then taking it one next step and being strategic about it, and
Right.
saying, okay, maybe this particular meeting I need to be Coach Chris, right? This meeting I need to be Consultant Chris, right?
Right.
Maybe I might need to be Dad,
Right.
Dad Chris,
Right.
in this scenario. So understanding what's needed, which parts of yourself are needed, and then strategically bringing them. It is authentic, as you mentioned, but
Yeah.
also it's strategic, and it helps to
Yes.
kind of build that brand when you have a better understanding of what parts of me are really required for this particular situation.
Yes, and I think there's something in the workplace that it says bring your full authentic self. So I disagree with that. And I definitely agree more with you because your full authentic self might not to need to show up at work, just like you said. There's a level of professionalism that you should always have. So, for instance, one of my mentors told me when I take pictures, I don't drink anyway, but she said, don't have a cup in my hand. She's like, Allison, your brand is a brand of you don't need to have drinks in your hand, and be mindful that when you take pictures people don't have drinks in your hand. And I'm like, okay, so that's something I look for, I'm cognizant of. And I don't mind if other people drink, but when you're with me and what I show up and how I show up, that's not something I necessarily do. So you won't catch me with that, with a drink in one of my pictures or a drink in my hand, even if it's water. I just won't put anything in my hand because it looks more professional. And I really believe that it's really how we show up in just different pictures, different opportunities, different outings, because unfortunately we live in a society that we are judged, and people tend to prejudge before they actually see you and understand what your qualities are and what you truly bring to the table. So I think I agree with you, it's very strict. You got to learn strategy. Everything in life is a strategy. You got to learn how to show up but not overdo it. Show up enough where people get enough to experience you as a person, but then you have your private life private and you have your work life. You got to, I think it's compartmentalize these different things in your life just so you can flow freely and really be your authentic self.
Yeah, no, I think it's funny. In talking about this, I'm thinking about a colleague I used to work with years ago, and no matter what, probably on the weekends, but I don't have verification of this, but no matter what the occasion, he wore a suit every single day. Right, that
Yeah.
was just his brand.
Right.
He didn't do casual. He wore a
Right.
suit, and so and for whatever reason, maybe he thought he looked great in suits, and he did. He looked really good in suits.
Right.
There was a certain image that he wanted to project, and so that's what he did. And so I think what you're saying is so important. Um, be authentic, own who you are, right? And be strategic about it.
Hmm.
What am I? If you're trying to put forth a certain image that isn't right for what you're trying to do, then that's
Yeah.
not very strategic, right?
Yeah. Right.
If you're bringing parts of yourself to the workplace or to your professional life that are counterproductive to your goals, that's not going to be a good thing.
Right.
You can probably see behind me. I've got this little logo.
You know,
I'm a big Eagles fan. I don't bring that part of me to work.
Well, well, yeah,
No, no,
but
no.
it's funny, not to be funny, but to be serious. I think that's part of that, like, uh personal branding that you understand. Um I'm not to say I feel like workplaces have gone too far with telling you show up as your whole self. We got to be realistic about that. There's an expectation that still needs to be executed from the employer and the employee. And I think that's absolutely correct what you said. You're not going to be up there screaming for the Eagles with a towel and jumping up and down at work, because how many people are going to take you seriously as a senior executive or someone in a leadership position? If I see you like, woo, and I'm like, wait, okay.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think that the mantra about bring your whole self to work was sort of encouraging people to feel more comfortable being who they are, because for the
Mhm,
longest time the corporate world tried to fit most of us into a box that we didn't belong in.
mhm.
Now, to your point, your whole self is probably a little vague, so we might need to clarify that a little bit. Because so I'm curious, just to ask you also, um, now that you're running AMI and you've had a successful launch and you're doing your
Yes.
thing, so tell me what. So I'm interested because it's a very obviously a very different world from banking. So
Oh, yeah.
what? So tell me, like, what's like the biggest change that you think that you see just right off the bat?
The creativity part of me. I feel like I didn't realize it was so muffled in the last 15 years, but I'm in a creative space that I haven't been in years, and it's so liberating. I think that's the most exciting and most interesting part, because I forgot that I could paint and I could paint well. I forgot that I could even skateboard. Not to say I'm skateboarding now, but just different creative things that I do that probably people would be surprised, but you do suppress those things when you work in certain environments. And banking taught me structure, because I can definitely be all over the place. So I'm grateful for the structure that I have, but being in this creative space now, it's blowing my mind, like the kind of stuff I'm coming up with. I'm like, oh my god, who is this girl?
Well, that's amazing. And actually, when you think about it, it's a shame. It's a
Yeah,
shame that, because you're 100% right. I think
yeah,
that it's way more common if you're in even not even a bank, but a
yeah,
corporation, an agency, or whatever. You wouldn't be in your previous role as an executive leader. You wouldn't be doing creative stuff. Unfortunately, right? Why not? Why can't you do creative stuff? You'd had to go down the hall or pick up the phone and call up the creative team and
yeah,
submit an internal work order or whatever and have them do it.
yep.
Why? Right? It's like you're not in a creative role per se, so you can't go into Canva and do some, create some assets, some visual assets, or some video or something like that, because that's not your job. That's someone else's job. When the
Right.
reality is that everybody is a steward of the brand.
Yes.
Everybody has a role to play in sort of evangelizing the brand, and the biggest stewards and the biggest ambassadors are the employees every day. And the
Yes.
other thing is that I think that most roles are creative, at least to some degree, right? And think about it. The best days that we have at work most of the time are when we get to come in and have a brainstorm or a
Right.
workshop, right? I
Right.
mean, workshop days, you go home and you're just buzzing, right?
Yes, your energy.
Yeah, because you got to be creative. There wasn't a
Yeah.
spreadsheet anywhere to be found. Nobody was talking budgets. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that's right. And then of course, obviously, when you are your own brand, when you have a company, you are the brand. You're kind of
Right.
inextricably linked, and so
Yes.
being able to say, hey, look, this role is going to be more creative,
Right.
right? I'm going to do some creative, not just because hey, I'm trying to do more with less or whatever. I don't want to hire somebody if I can do it myself, but also, hey, look, I want more creativity in my role, right?
Right.
I think one
Right.
of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make when they start their own venture is recreating the exact same conditions that they ran away from or wanted to
Yeah.
get away from, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
if you worked tons of hours, had very little creativity, had high stress at your
Mhm.
previous job,
Yeah.
why start a company and then recreate all those conditions, right? Why
Right.
not why not bring the things that you wish you had on those days when you were slogging through? It's 8 o'clock, you still got
Mhm.
another 2 hours left to work to go to work on this deliverable, and you're thinking, man, if I could do this differently, this is how my job would look.
Right. I agree 1,000%. And I think and it's a different space and it's like I've come alive again. So you're Chris 4.0, I'm Allison like 2.5.
And for anybody who hasn't isn't aware of the reference, um, in telling my own backstory, I kind of
Yes.
talked about the various evolutions of, I started my career, as ironic as it is that I'm the digital guy. I started out my career as a print designer with a degree in
Wow.
graphic design, and had to make a series of pivots once the desktop publishing revolution started and everything
Mhm.
moved from manual sort of paste up drawing board types of graphic design to computerized work. And then
Yeah.
I had to make another pivot when print really started, sort of losing a lot of steam to digital and .com and everything. So, I estimated that I'm on around Chris G 4.0 about now. Hopefully this version has a far fewer bugs than the previous
Right.
versions.
Right.
But I think that I was talking a few weeks ago to some students. A friend of mine teaches a course and asked me to come speak to his students and everything. And almost all of them are about to graduate.
Wow.
And I told them, I said, you're going to have to pivot 3 or 4 times more than I did,
Mhm.
just based on the rapid pace of technological change. You're
Yep.
going to have to adapt new skills long
Yep.
after you've graduated from college. You're going to have to teach
Yep.
yourself lifelong learning, all of those things. So I think that that's kind of the time that we're in. And I
Definitely.
think the challenge is that it's happening at a time when companies by and large have cut corporate training, you know,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
Earlier in my career, and I wouldn't even say that much earlier, maybe like up until about 2008, 2009, the financial, the housing crisis. Up
Mhm.
until then, there was a lot more training in companies, skills
Yeah.
training, hard skills, I mean,
Yep.
soft skills, all of
Yep.
those things. And now I think for the most part, most of the training that companies and corporations do is that sort of like the online module training,
Yep.
which
Yep.
I think has its place, but
Yes.
it's sort of now it's sort of almost exclusively that, as opposed to before you'd have online training
Yep.
and you'd have in-person training, you'd have role playing and things like that, where you could really kind of get into a situation and feel it. So I think that that's a challenge nowadays, in a sense that we have this seismic shift. AI is really becoming a big factor, right?
Yes.
A lot of
Yes.
people know they have to upskill
Yep.
and they just don't know how, right? What
Right.
do I need to learn? How?
Right.
So I think that's a challenge.
No, I agree 1,000%. I'm just kind of sitting here thinking because you said a couple things that I just want to piggyback on. I think companies don't value, not every company, but I can say some companies don't value the importance of making their associates or allowing their associates to have their own personal brand. People truly do business with people. Major corporations are not very tangible, but the individual is. So having that individual and that personal relationship, it only elevates the corporation that much more. So I agree with you, especially with AI and needing to upskill. Those are things that are not going away. So if you empower your people to embrace their personal brand and really help them, empower them to understand it, but also empower them to be able to elevate the company along with themselves, you'll get a much happier workplace and more people that are willing to go above and beyond because they feel like you're investing back into them. And I think that that's important, Chris. And I think that also goes along with upskilling and training. It's
Yeah.
necessary, especially in the world we live in, because you're going to see more people going to that entrepreneur space because they don't always feel like they're getting the support from these larger corporations that they need. And I know there's some great corporations out there that do, but there's also some that don't understand the importance of it.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that there are a bunch that don't understand the importance. I think there are a bunch that don't don't want to spend the money.
Right,
Quite frankly, right?
right.
It goes back to that old saying. I think it was like a cartoon or something like that, where it's like a CEO talking to a CFO, and the CFO
Uh-huh.
says, "Well, what if we pay to train our employees and they leave?" And the CEO says, "What if we don't train them and they stay?" Right? So I think that the short term thinking says we're paying all this money and there's no
Right,
guarantee that these employees are going to stick around for the company to benefit from all the training that we paid for.
right.
And what I think that attitude misses is everybody's not going to go.
No,
Everybody's not going to leave. And if
No.
everybody leaves, you got bigger problems than training, right?
Yeah, true
So
story.
you got
True
other
story.
problems that you got to deal with. But everybody's
True.
not going to leave. You're going
No.
to train people who are going to become future leaders.
Yep.
So I think that's the challenge, and we'll have to see how companies work that out. But I think that to your point, people are taking it upon themselves and not necessarily waiting because they know that throughout my career, I'm probably going to have several employers by the time I
Right.
retire.
Right.
So if this employer isn't going to pay for training, I'm going to go out and get my training myself. And I think it references coming back to what you mentioned about executive coaches.
Yep.
A lot of companies will pay for that, but a lot of people are paying for the coaches out of their own pockets, right?
Yes.
Training, online training. Of course, obviously, there's the training modules that we talked about, but a lot of
Right.
people are paying for training on their own. They're
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, look, this is where I want to get to in terms of my career, and if I need to do some things, if I need to invest in myself in order to make sure that I realize those goals, I'm going to do it."
I
And I think
agree.
that's the attitude that you have to survive in today's environment.
Well, like I tell my 16-year-old all the time, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want anything in life? You got to go get it. Nothing is going to be handed to you. No, so you just got to go get it and be willing to make that investment in yourself because it really pays off in the long run. I think about where I am now compared to 15 years ago. I was a single mom selling cell phones for AT&T. I was when the first iPhone came out, I think I worked a 12-hour shift, right? And so one of my mentors and mentorship and executive coaching, I'm big on. So you'll hear me say that a lot. But one of my mentors, Vignette Matthews, pulled me aside, took me to lunch, and she's like, eventually your daughter's going to go to high school and she's going to go away to college. And she's like, she's going to hate you by work because you're working 12-hour days. And she's like, what can you do that will help you not have to work these type of days? And I was like, well, I'm not a teacher. I don't want to teach anybody. She's like, go work at the bank. And at that particular time, you didn't see a lot of African American women in leadership roles. I'm from San Diego, so it's not something that was truly visible. So being now in Houston, that was such an eye opening because I see so many African American women that are in real leadership positions. So it gave this inspiring maybe young lady 15 years ago, it gave me tangible things that I could eventually be because I didn't see it. And I know there's going to be times where we don't necessarily see what we want to be, but it just makes it even more actualized when you can actually touch somebody, spend that time with them, ask them how, pull on them for information, and just be like a sponge and soak it all up because we're in a time where you need knowledge is power. And if you're unknowledgeable or unlearned, you're doing yourself a disservice because there's so much information. And if you want to learn something from somebody, don't be afraid to ask. People at a certain level, what I have learned, like, and you could probably attest to this, when you get to a certain level of executive, they want to share their information, but they want to share it with people that are going to apply it. They don't want to share it with people that are going to waste their time because they only have so much time. So I'm all about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. And you're right. I think that if you show yourself, I mean, obviously no one takes 100% of advice they get from anybody.
Of
But I
course,
think you're
right?
right. I think that right, but but I've encouraged colleagues find mentor. I've encouraged mentees find
Yeah.
mentors. Don't just talk to me.
Right.
I love the idea of having like a personal board of directors. You
Yep.
should have different people who are
Yep.
in different mentor capacities that bring different things to the table, right?
Yep.
In certain situations, like I need to talk to this person.
Yep.
I'm about to go negotiate a big pay raise. I need to talk to that person, right?
Hmm.
So don't put all your eggs in one basket. All right,
Yeah,
so
that's
so
so
so really quickly, I want to talk a little bit about AMI.
okay. Let's
Uh,
talk.
so, I think that now, obviously, we've talked about transformation and personal branding, and
Yes.
you've gone through a transformation. You've gone through a new branding for a new you.
Okay.
Um, so what? Tell me, just really succinctly, kind of like what people watching this video should take away. What are the three things they should know about what AMI does? Like say for instance, for me, it's AI training and workshops, it's LinkedIn coaching, and
Okay.
it's digital strategy, right?
Okay.
For consulting. So what would be the things, or what it could be one thing, or two things, or whatever. But like if someone's looking at AMI and saying, "Oh man, Allison is really amazing. I love what she's all about. I want to work with her," but they're like, "I don't know how to work with her. How do I work
Yeah.
with her?"
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing for me is when you're ready, the biggest thing for me and AMI, right, is elevation. I'm all about pushing you and helping you get to that next level, whatever that may be. If that's becoming a thought leader, if that's becoming the next level executive, if it's a mid-level person looking to get to a vice president role, if it's even a company looking to elevate their visibility to help them get more clients and be more strategic about who they target, that's what AMI does. So I really feel like AMI is an elevator. Like we elevate your brand here, and we help you understand the importance of not just elevating one time. I feel like it's like a pivot. You continue to elevate. You just when I am a believer that you don't arrive. You just continue to grow. I feel like when you're arriving, that means that you have nothing left to learn, which I think is untrue. So AMI is going to elevate. I do the LinkedIn coaching, executive coaching, but my biggest thing is that I love people to be seen and I love good news to get out. I think that's like Allison in a nutshell. If you're doing something great in the community, I feel like the community should know about it. And if you don't know how to structure your release on that or structure how to get that out and how to get people more engaged with your brand, let AMI help you do that, because we're all about elevating your brand with visibility, but also strategy behind it, right? Because you need to know who you're trying to target. So I definitely think that's what AMI does, and that's what I love to do.
Fantastic. No, that's all. I think that is such great advice. Whenever I talk to executives, or in previous roles, when I'd be talking to advising Fortune 500 companies, whatever, um, it was always surprising to me. Like I won't call anybody out, but if you insert name of Fortune 500 company, right? That's household name, everybody knows. You would think that they have this really ironclad marketing plan that's really detailed, and they know exactly who they want to reach and how they want to reach them and what they want, and they have all these detailed personas and everything. I found that is rare. That is extremely rare. In fact, I remember about 6, 7 years ago being in a meeting with the senior comms leaders for a household name. Uh, I'll be vague here.
Mhm.
Household name company that everybody has been to, right? It's a store, and so I remember the senior comms people were in a meeting, and they said our customers love us,
Yeah.
and then they said we have no idea why, and I thought to myself, every one of you should be fired.
Right.
I mean, how are you sitting here still asking, wonder, how do you not know, right? How
Yeah.
have you not found ways to try and get that information from your customers, who, in
Right.
my experience, are more than willing to tell you, right?
Right.
So
Right.
it just was really interesting to me, um, that they had no idea what the attributes were, the aspects of the brand, of the product, or whatever it
Okay.
was. And it was probably the brand, because the product itself was a commodity, right?
Right.
So what are the attributes of the brand that our customers love, so we can make sure that we're constantly delivering on that, right? Whether
Right.
it's tangible or intangible. So
Right.
I thought it was really interesting, and like I said, that particular example is not an outlier. It was more times than not. I
Yeah.
would, and my team would be in there. We're okay. Well, who's your customer? Well, I don't know. Everybody. Like, no, it's not
No.
everybody.
No. You
you
never
know,
saw it.
Right. And and for people who don't understand why, okay, well, Chris, Allison, what do you mean? I don't understand. So, of course, this particular brand, like most brands, wants to sell to as wide a base of people as possible, right? But you can't market to everyone. So, what you ideally try to do is you try to pick a specific or some specific audience segments, cohorts, whatever the terms you might want to use, and say, okay, our best opportunities are with these particular customers. They're
Yep.
our core
Yep.
customer. We're going to
Yep.
sell this product to everybody else too. Anybody who's going to reach in their wallet and pull out the money to pay for it. But
Hmm.
this is going to be our go-to. These are people we're going to market our services or our product to, um,
Yep.
and that just helps you to be more focused.
Right.
It just helps you to be more focused in your marketing, helps you to be more focused in your communications. It's almost kind of, I liken it to that anecdote about the janitor at NASA back during the right, where someone asked him, "What's your job?" and he said, to put a man on the moon. Right?
Yeah.
Everyone in the organization is focused on a singular goal, and so the companies that get it right, they'll have personas. Let's say Mike and Wilma, right?
Yeah.
And they're talking about Mike and Wilma constantly. Well, what would Mike think about this? Would this resonate
Right.
with Wilma?
Right.
That kind of thing. I think that's one would assume that most Fortune 500 brands operate that way, but I would say very few do. And
No.
moving that over to personal brand, I would say it's also the same thing. Most of the
Oh yeah.
executives over the years that I've worked with, even CEOs, um, a lot of times I would get hired and my firm would get hired to do thought leadership programs for them after they had already been putting out content for months, if not years, right?
Right.
And they're
Right.
like, I'm about to give up because this ain't working. I'm not seeing any
Right.
benefits. It's just taking up my
Right.
time. And in the
Right.
first meeting, we'd be like, all right, well, who are you trying to reach? What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? What do you hope to come out of this?
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know. Uh, Seriously,
Well,
uh, I
no.
don't know. You tell me
Yeah.
what should my goals be? I'm like,
Right. I just got here. You're the one that this is your space.
well, also I can't, I can make suggestions, but
Right.
ultimately this has got to be something you want, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah.
doing this. I'm taking my time to do this. We're pouring resources into doing this because we want X, right? Is it leads? You want leads, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you want lead. All right, great. Well, that's this strategy. You're
Right.
doing this. If you want leads, you shouldn't be doing this. You should be doing that,
Right.
right? If you want to get media, you want to get speaking engagements, you want to be at places like Davos or whatever. I don't know, panels, keynotes,
Yep.
whatever. Okay, well then you should be doing this, not that, right? So, but if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know who you want to reach, then it's just spinning your wheels.
Yeah, it's a shot in the dark.
Shot in the dark, right? Right. That old quote from Zig Ziglar: if you have nothing as a target, you'll hit it every time, right?
Yeah. And you're just throwing everything on the wall.
Oh my goodness. So along those lines,
Uh-huh.
so who would be, if someone's listening to this, watching this, what have you, and they're curious, and all of this is sounding amazing. So knowing that obviously, you're going to work with a wide range of people, but who's really kind of your sweet spot in terms of like a customer?
So my sweet spot in terms of a customer, I would say the person who has started to elevate their brand but needs that extra push. The person who has started being visible but needs the structure of having someone to actually help you come up with a strategy of what it looks like for you to be successful in your niche market, right? So that's what I would say. That person who has started but needs that push to really go to that next level. And somebody, I think the biggest thing with any of it, like you just said, is having somebody that's willing to make that investment and be just as passionate about going to that next level. Because I can show you what Allison has done personally for myself over the years, and I've been very, very intentional and very strategic. But that was through a lot of great coaching. That was through a lot of great mentorship. And when people tell me something, I really take it to heart and I listen, because I feel like you should maintain a posture of a student. Um, and people might laugh at something else that I do that probably is kind of funny, but I don't think it really is I serve. I feel like serving and keeping that attitude of being of servitude, that also helps you keep that posture of being a student and a good steward. I feel like when we get past those, then you really lose the point of and the principle of foundation of who you are. I feel you have to have that foundation laid on who you are, so then you can build upon it. So I hope that answered. That was my long and short, but I hope it answered.
No, I think that's great. And I think that I'm glad that you layered in the whole notion of service too, because,
Yeah.
you know, it's it's a cycle, right?
Yep.
You have to provide something of value to get something back.
Yep.
If you're just constantly taking, we all hate those people, right? The
Yeah.
folks that you go to an event and they're talking, spending speed dating, basically talking to everybody for like 2 minutes, and they're sitting there talking to you, and the whole time they're eyeing up the next person they want to go
Yeah.
talk to,
Yeah.
right? So they're not giving anything of value. They're
Right.
just trying to take. They want to collect as many emails or connections or whatever as possible, but they're not offering anything of value. They're not going to have a substantive conversation with you, and and say where you walk away saying, "Hey, I really enjoyed my conversation with this person." Right? So
Yeah.
I think that serving to think beyond yourself, um,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Thinking, who can I help? You know,
Yes.
if you're an executive leader, you need to have a bunch of past and present mentees, right? To your point before, you've got to be giving. You've got to be
Yep.
helping build future leaders, right?
Yep.
I'm more proud of uh, my mentees and their success than my own. You
Right.
know,
It just does something for you because it lets you see that you sowed into good soil, that they're listening, that what you taught them is not in vain. So that's why I always take my mentor 15 years ago who got me into banking. I take her with me everywhere I go because she's part of my elevation and she's part of my story. And I don't ever forget what she poured into me, what she taught me, and I have no problem paying it forward because I've been so fortunate to get many women and men who don't mind sitting down with me and giving me some tools to make myself even more successful. And I'm grateful that they're willing to do that. And I think that's the intentionality. And I wish there was more people that were more intentional about that because the changing of the guards is true. This next generation, we're coming. We're here. We've arrived. And a lot of people are still kind of holding on to their spot, like almost coveting it. That, oh my God, they're not going to take my spot. They're not going to take my spot. Which I think the wise thing of the generation before us is it's a partnership. Partner with us. Don't be afraid that we're going to take your spot, that we're taking the limelight, or we're taking something away from you. I think the greatest thing, like you said, is to see your mentees go further. Just like I expect my daughter to go further than me, which she knows that I've expressed this to her, and um, and I think that's how it should be. We pay it forward so those kids can go further, faster, quicker than we did, and I love that.
I love it. Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. Allison, I thank you so much for carving out some time to share your wisdom. Super
Yes.
excited about your launch,
Yes.
AMI, and I'll put a link in the show notes to all of your information so that people can come check you out.
Chris, thank you so much. It has been my pleasure and my honor. I would have never wanted to do a podcast with anyone else, my first one. So thank you for this opportunity.
It's my pleasure.